This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast revisiting television sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between. This week, Kolchak the Night Stalker, episodes 15 and 16.
The teenage years, 16 candles, fervent passions, aimless joyrides, and the forbidden taste of beer. A time the world allows for sowing one's wild oats. But for some individuals I came to know in this summer of their discontent, it had been a time when they had sown the seeds of their own destruction.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast blossoming into a flower of evil. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
Tuna fish.
So that, we'll get into it, but that second episode's guest stars are insane.
Yeah. I'll say right off the bat, I like these episodes more than I like the previous ones. There's something a little bit off, you know? Well,
before we get into it, Jordan, I've got a little game for you because it's game time.
Oh, okay.
It's back. My new favorite game, Echo.
Oh no, it's the Emmy, Canadian Award,
yep,
Hugo,
yep,
Oscar.
Now you got it. Now you got it down pat.
Yeah.
All right, Jordan. So this is only basically the writers, directors. These are the only people who have won anything on this show, and they're the main creative team. So we're gonna go with that. How many Emmys do you think the creative team on this has won jointly?
I bet it was more than some shows we've seen before. I would say 6.
Jordan, it was 11 Emmys.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that's a lot. Was it all The Sopranos?
Well, yeah. You have to think David Chase. So that's 5 for The Sopranos. He got 1 for a 1980 TV movie called Off the Minnesota Strip, and 1 for The Rockford Files.
Oh, The Rockford Files. I forgot about that show.
And then one of the directors, a fellow named Robert Shearer, he won an Emmy for The Danny Key Show in 1964.
Did you like that show?
Yeah, one of my favorite variety talk shows.
When's the variety show coming back?
That's a good question. Never, I don't think. I think it's over.
Never. It won't. It's over. That time is gone.
Yeah, that time in our lives is over, Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final person was writer Michael Kozel maybe, and he won 3 Emmys for Hill Street Blues.
Hill Street Blues. I've never seen that show.
Me neither.
Which was the one? Oh, you know what? I'm mixing it up with T.J. Hooker with William Shatner.
That never won any Emmys.
No.
All right. How many Canadian Screen Awards do you think the creative team won?
I think it's actually 0, but I'm going to say 1.
Oh, it was 0. You're right this time.
It was 0.
There are no Canadians involved in this.
Well, there wasn't the last time we did this, and they still won 1.
That's true. That you can never tell who a Canadian will give an award to. All right, Jordan. How many Hugos do you think this was won?
I'm going to say it won 1 Hugo.
Oh, I'm afraid you should have thought about who was involved in writing these episodes, because there are 3 Hugos, all to Robert Zemeckis.
Oh, right, Robert Zemeckis. I was reminded because he was one of the writers on one of these episodes we're going to talk about. I forgot he was involved.
And he won for Contact, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then he shared one with Bob Gale, who also co-wrote this episode, or co-wrote the story to this episode, for Back to the Future. And finally, Jordan, how many Oscars?
0.
Jordan, it's 1. Robert Zemeckis for Forrest Gump, baby.
Oh, I forgot about Forrest Gump.
How could you forget about Forrest Gump?
I forgot about Forrest. How do you think Forrest Gump's aged?
I imagine pretty badly.
I think it's one of those movies where everyone loved it. Like it was a huge, critically acclaimed, did well at the box office kind of movie. But I don't know how fondly it's remembered.
This is old hat. I think a lot of people know this these days. But are you aware of the Forrest Gump novel?
I do know that it has a quite different tone. I actually have a friend who has a theory that the whole movie is actually a bit of a satire and it has a mean spirit through it, but I don't think it does. I think that's being generous.
No, I think that is what the book is a mean-spirited satire.
Not though once you get Tom Hanks involved, you know?
No, that changes everything.
What's your favorite Tom Hanks movie?
I don't know if I have one. They're all so good, Jordan.
I think I'd say Road to Perdition.
I've never seen that one, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Watch it this week. We'll talk about it next time.
I like the ones where he's like a CGI creation.
Oh, yeah. Those are the other Robert Zemeckis ones.
All right. Shall we get into it, Jordan?
Yeah, let's do it.
Here's the IMDb summary for episode 11, Chopper. Land development disturbs the final resting place of a headless, sword-wielding cyclist who hunts down and beheads the rival gang bikers who killed him.
Let me say something about this episode. This has two, I don't know if it's themes is the right word, but two bits of content that seems to run through almost every 1970s show that we watch, which is land development deals and biker gangs.
Absolutely, Jordan. I mean, I was like, finally, Kolchak's doing an episode about evil condo developers. I bet, you know what, Jordan?
What's that?
I bet they're pals with Doug Ford. Am I right?
What a deep cut just for not only Canadians but Ontarians.
Anyway, these real estate developers, they've bought a graveyard. I don't know how you buy a graveyard full of bodies, but they have, and they're going to develop condos on it. So they've moved all of the bodies out of the graveyard just into a warehouse until they figure out what they're going to do with them.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how realistic this is. I'm sure like cemeteries and graveyards have been moved before. I would assume there is a pretty specific set of procedures that need to be done to move bodies and permissions and such. This seems a little haphazard, but maybe it's just the 70s.
Hey, Jordan. Sounds like Doug Ford's plan to solve the housing crisis. Am I right?
I love this. This is a great little bit.
Anyway, what we see is as they're moving these coffins into this like warehouse, it's not even a cold warehouse, it's like a warm warehouse. I don't know what's going to happen. They're moving these coffins in. One of them like knocks against something, breaks open, and a little cylinder, or what would you call that?
An urn.
An urn, a metal canister. There we go. A metal canister sort of falls out. My brain just shut off right there. And this is like the setup. Like whatever's falling out of this coffin, we know we're in trouble. Anyway, after that happens, we cut to an elderly woman waking up to the sound of a motorcycle revving in her garage.
That's right. And at this point, they mention that she's an insomniac. So I don't know why she needs to be an insomniac, because a motorbike would wake you up regardless.
It's just Kolchak. They have to have a huge backstory.
So the lady wakes up, she comes down her stairs, she sort of lives on it seems like a second floor, comes down the stairs, and what we see is kind of a superimposed, like, ghost-like motorbike driving through the...
yeah, Kool-Aid vanning right through that door.
Yeah, but it looks not good, and I was like, oh no, this is what it's going to look like for the rest of the show? And the answer is weirdly no, and I don't know why. It only has this sort of spectral appearance only in this one scene.
Yeah, it was a very weird choice that I never sorted out either. I'm just like, but the ghost is a physical manifestation for the rest of it, so why is it not? And why is it... And so, like, it's just so funny. Like, it busts through this door spiritually. It busts through the ghost of the garage door, but the garage door's physical form is fine.
I like that you said it busted through the door spiritually. It's very evangelical. I think really what the answer is a kind of boring answer. I think it's a lot cheaper to do this in post, this sort of like overlaying of the film, as opposed to actually having a bike burst through a door. I think that's all the answer is.
But it's so weird is they did definitely shoot a bike bursting through a door as well.
It's probably old footage from something else. That's probably why.
Oh, could be. Except it's headless. How could it be? Because this headless biker rides off into the night and tracks down a taxi cab depot.
Yeah, and can we talk about the headless guy real quick before we get into the plot mechanics here?
Sure.
So when we're going to see the headless, essentially he's a headless horseman, but it's modern times, it's a headless motorcyclist.
He's a biker.
Headless biker. And to give the effect of having him have no head, what they've done is they've built up the guy's shoulders and chest to be much taller. So where his head actually is, the stunt performer, the shoulders have been brought up to his head level. So it looks like he has no head.
It's a classic Halloween costume.
Yeah, and it doesn't look great. It doesn't look terrible, but it doesn't look great. And I think the real telltale sign, which they could have fixed, is the arms. Because his arms are normal, so where the elbow joint is in the wrong spot on this body. So you have this very Muppet-esque sort of appearance to him, and I couldn't stop looking at the arms.
It is like the cheapest way to do this effect. I'll give them this. Like, I get it. They don't really. This is not something they excel at, is these kind of effects necessarily. Yeah. I do like that the top where the head should be is like obviously a severed neck, but there's also just one like white bone just sticking at the top to tell you where the skull is. It made me laugh a lot.
Good on the guy, actually, the stunt performer, the stunt driver, who had to drive with, I'm assuming looking through a tiny little hole in his shirt is all he had, because he does a ton of bike jumps and like wheelies and a whole bunch of actual stunts. I was like, that must be very difficult to do, not being able to see very well.
It's kind of the saving grace of the Headless Biker is that like the bike driving is actually really good, so it's kind of fun to watch this Headless Biker like do bike stunts.
And he has a sword.
Well, that's just it. He goes to this cab depot, finds this cab driver who I guess is just getting off work, pulls a sword out of nowhere, and proceeds to behead him.
And this happens a few times in the episode. It's pretty funny that his go-to is just lopping people's heads off. But every time it happens, they sort of do a freeze frame and go to a commercial, so you don't actually see the head get lopped off. But it's pretty fun.
The freeze frame was especially funny this episode because, you know, they can't show the violence of it, so they're using like the freeze frame to like shock you. But I believe when he cuts the biker's head off, they freeze frame as he's about to hit it, and then they cut for a reaction shot to the guy who works there, and he's like, "Oh my god!" And they just cut back to the freeze frame.
I forgot about that. That's funny.
It was very funny. Of course, this all draws Kolchak in. So he hears about this. He heads down to the police station or to the cab depot to check it up, and he is immediately stymied by this week's annoyed guest captain, played by
Larry Linville. What?
I knew you would be so excited. Your hero, Larry.
Well, the funny thing is, there's a couple things to mention about Larry Linville, who obviously is from MASH, is what he's most famously from. And it's weird that we've had two MASH guest stars back to back, for one. The second thing I note is both of them get rather underutilized, I find, for bringing in... Now, I'm not going to say they're the biggest stars in the world, but they were on one of the biggest TV shows, so they're a recognizable face, and they sort of just have a part that anybody could do, which I thought was a little surprising. But I do like that this is their second time Larry Linville showed up on our podcast, as he was also in... Super Train.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. Like, he's back. And I will say
so was Jamie Farr, but we just didn't watch the episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Or Super Train.
Yeah. And it's weird that those two were the two that from MASH that kept getting roles. What about Gary Berghoff? Am I right?
I will say that Larry Linville gets a little more to do than Jamie Farr. He's a few more scenes.
I agree.
And I actually like this. I think this maybe should have been a thing. They should have every annoyed like police commander who has to deal with Kolchak they should have just had it. It should have been like Murphy Brown's assistant. There should have always been some weird guest star coming in to be like Kolchak,
or the Batman and Robin walking up the side of the building and the celebrity pops out the window. Same sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I agree. That actually is a really fun idea.
It would have been good. I think it would have been a funny concept. It would have worked for the show, but whatever. I digress. Obviously, police captain doesn't want to help Kolchak. Usual song and dance, blah, blah, blah. So Kolchak goes to see the city mortician to see if he can get some information there. And very sad to see Gordy the Ghoul is no longer there.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Was it Gordy the Ghoul or it wasn't? It's just a different guy who takes money?
It seems to be a different guy who's doing the same thing. He is making Kolchak bribe him to get information. This guy's taking bribes so he can go back to medical school because as far as I can tell, he's going to be some sort of hair doctor to help with hair loss.
I didn't catch that at all.
Yeah, I think he's reading a book on hair loss when Kolchak arrives, and then midway through he offers to give Kolchak like a diagnosis for his baldness or his like balding head. At any rate, this whole scene also doesn't really... It's so weird. There's like three scenes. Like, we meet the captain. Kolchak like gets basic information. He goes to see this mortician. He also gets like a little more information, but nothing really of note. And then he goes and visits a guy who owns a motorcycle shop and shows him a picture of like tire tracks.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll give it to this. I don't know if it entirely works. The answer is it doesn't entirely work. However, I think this show is a little bit stronger when there's a little bit more investigative sort of things. And I do like that he's actually putting together pieces, and as inconsequential that they may be, it's like, I have a tire, so I'm going to figure out what kind of tire would make those tracks. And so at least it builds on itself a little bit, as opposed to what this show sometimes does, which is just kind of waste time, and then in voiceover he talks to someone and that gives him information. At least he's going and finding stuff. You're right. It's a little far-fetched to that a guy selling motorbikes would know a tire based on the tire tracks. But the only thing that's worth of note of this scene is that he's selling, I'm assuming it's Yamaha. I don't think they mention the brand, but seemingly a Japanese brand, because he mentions how much he hates the Japanese from the war, but now he's had to forgive them because they have real good motorbikes.
Yeah, that's how he makes his living, selling them. So.
I was like, well, I guess it has only been at this point only 30 years since the war.
That character, this thing, all three characters we've met are really interesting in these scenes. The scenes themselves are just like very odd and provide very little forward momentum, but you're like, meet a interesting character in every single scene. All unrelated to the central plot, of course.
Yeah.
He learns the motorcycles from an old 50s tire that used to go on these bikes from the 50s, and they were frequently used by two rival outlaw motorcycle gangs, the Jokers and the Bishops. And so this kind of gives him his, like, a little bit of information.
Now, quickly, who would you rather be a member of, Luke? You got to choose.
Oh, it's going to be the Bishops because I got to wear those hats.
I'll take the Jokers.
Because you want to wear that makeup and say, why so serious? At any rate, Kolchak ends up back at the INS office, and we get this, like, this one, as they do with the side characters, is give them, like, barely a thread of, like, a Z plot, basically. But the Z plot is Vincenzo has an ulcer, so he's trying to be calmer about things, and, like, that just leads to him, gags of him, like, wanting to eat junk food, but he has to eat, like, a salad, and then he likes, like, I'm going to order a knish instead. It's just, it's such a nothing.
Is the implication that Vincenzo's a real big fat guy? Because he's not that fat. He's a little bit portly, I'd say, but they seem to really lean into it like he's a real piggy. And I'm like, he's not really.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a weird subplot that he's very unhealthy, but I just feel like Kolchak would be so much more unhealthy.
Agreed.
What I do like, though, is when Vincenzo asks Carl, like, kind of the story he's working on, I believe what he says to Carl is he says, quote, "Whip it on me," as the kids say.
I didn't remember that line at all. That would have been what's real. Whip it on me?
Whip it on me.
Oh, I'm going to try it tomorrow at work. How do you think it will go?
Great. I think people are going to love it.
Yeah, whip it on me. And then I'm going to add baby.
Yeah, people love it when you add baby to any sentence. Anyway, Carl sort of tells him the story about the beheading and the the cab driver. And, you know, he there's a few angles that Vincenzo's sort of interested in, but Kolchak's like, no, I'm not taking any of those angles about police malpractice or biker gangs. I'm really leaning toward pursuing the supernatural, superhuman killer angle.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, classic Kolchak.
Yeah,
it's in his character, to be fair.
And you can only imagine what that says to Vincenzo's ulcer. Am I right, Jordan?
Yeah. I mean, that's the weird thing about this gag, because I actually think these scenes they're cute, and they're always pretty welcome in the show to go back to the office and have this little bit of levity. But what's weird is the implication that he has stomach problems because he overeats, when it's much more clear and makes more sense that it's just all because of Kolchak.
Yeah,
and the stress that he induces.
Doing a mix of that, like his diet and the stress. So now he has to like get help. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's all such a minor color to the episode at best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At any rate, Miss Emily has been able to track down the only witness to the beheading at the cab place, and he's been committed to an asylum. In a room he shares with two comically insane people. I was weird. Such a weird.
Yeah, and it's played for laughs, but it's so incredibly insensitive, especially in modern times now, and conversations around mental health, to have it sort of be like crazy people and they're yelling things. Can you believe it? Isn't that zany? It's like, man, that's actually really sad.
It was very sad. But the witness swears to Kolchak that the assailant he saw killed a man was a headless biker who had a sword and was driving the same sort of motorcycle that the victim always talked about driving in a biker gang in the 50s. So this really, sets Kolchak on the path of this supernatural killer.
Another question for you, Luke. Let's say you're killed in some sort of gangland violence, and your ghost gets to come back for revenge. What form are you taking? Is it motorbike with no head?
Motorbike? Oh, I believe I am podcaster with no mouth.
Oh no! You just sit in front of a microphone?
I show up with a microphone and rip people's tongues out.
It's me and whoever replaces you after you died.
I hunt you down.
Oh, if I had my tongue torn out, what a horrible punishment.
Oh, it wouldn't be pleasant. Believe me, the way I do it, whew, you won't like it.
Can't whistle anymore. Can't French kiss. can't
your top two hobbies.
Always. It's one after the other.
Anyway, Kolchak then goes and this is also weird. It's nice to see Larry Lindholm. Is that his name? Linville?
Yeah, Linville.
It's nice to see him, but he goes and pulls a fast one on the celebrity guest police captain.
Yeah.
Where he shows up and feeds him some weird lines about the victim being the heir to some fortune, which he's clearly making up. And somehow that the captain doesn't believe him, but it compels the captain to reveal all the investigative information he's put together.
Yeah, well, what it basically, again, how it works, I don't know. It's sort of played for laughs, but what it is it's not really a reverse psychology. It's he knows that this captain is a little bit insecure in his job and wants to prove how good he is and how much he knows. And so Kolchak goes, yeah, this bit of information about the guy, which is clearly wrong. And the guy keeps saying, that's not right. It's this. And it's not right. It's this. So he just unintentionally gives Kolchak all the information he needs, which, again, I at least like that we get to see him using his smarts, if you will, to get the information in multiple ways. You know, he goes to odd people and gets a little bit of information. He goes to another odd person. He goes to the police chief and tricks him. And so at least in this episode, we get to see his sort of odd process of putting together a story.
I think that's very fair. And you get a little extra of the guest star. I can see why you'd put the scene there. So
yeah.
At any rate, what he kind of learns is that the cabbie who died, his wife and sister were all part of the Jokers in the 50s. They were all friends with these guys. And
my gang. Sorry.
and one of the guys there who they were friends with was the head of the Jokers, a guy named Studs Spake. And he is now the head of a new biker gang called the Devil's Advocates.
They're always looking at things from the outside perspective, you know?
It's absolutely. They're always what if we looked at it a little different? So Kolchak goes and drops in on this cabbie's funeral, and when he gets there, he sees this Studs guy with his new bikers. They're all hanging out there, and this was wild, too. He arrives. They're clearly not welcome, the bikers, at the funeral, but they're there to say goodbye to their friend, and they're all wearing swastikas.
Whoa, I didn't see that. Were they?
Yeah, they're all wearing swastikas, and I'm just well, I mean, accurate to white supremacist bikers, I suppose, but I'm how many times are we going to tune into the show and that's featured?
That is, you know what's funny, Luke? I didn't see it.
Well, you just assumed they were Hindu again this time.
That's what it was, yeah.
At any rate, Stud sort of reveals to Kolchak that the other night while he was doing his day job, which is telephone repairman or something, he's up a pole, a headless biker attacked him that night. And not only did he attack him, Studs is I'm pretty sure I knew who that is. And he was buried at that cemetery they dug up. And all his friend bikers just start making fun of him and really joshing him for being crazy. And they get tossed out of the funeral.
Yeah, it was a weird scene. I wasn't sure at first what the whole point of the scene was, because really what it is to give that little bit of information and then have Kolchak meet the
widow,
the taxi driver who's died. Yeah, meet his wife.
And yeah, they get tossed out by her, and then Kolchak kind of goes to talk to the wife and sort of hey, what do you know about a guy who might be headless trying to kill your friends? And she just gets really emotional and pretends to be very sad over her husband's death, and Kolchak just is uncomfortable with any emotion, and he just runs away.
Yeah, it was an effective strategy.
It worked. It totally worked. I give her credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, since INS has been reporting on this cemetery where the condos are being built, Kolchak's already aware of what's been happening, kind of where this warehouse full of bodies is. So he's gonna go check it out since that Studs guy was talking about it. And when he arrives, he finds Studs is already there, poking around the coffins looking for something. Now, as Studs is doing this, a headless biker shows up, the one we were expecting. He rolls in, he does a couple bike jumps, leaps some coffins, chops this guy's head off. A cop car pulls in, he jumps that cop car too. He's a real Evel Knievel headless biker, and takes off, and Kolchak witnesses the whole thing.
Does he get a photo at this point? Oh no, he does, but the photo he gets is cropped at the exact spot where the guy's head would be.
Yeah. I think he shows the Vincenzo. He's like, you cropped the guy's head off, and he's like, no. Well, if it was a little higher, you would see there was no head.
Yeah, which is funny. It's fine. It's a way to get around that he gets a photo, but it's not usable at all.
It's true. And Kolchak kind of has all these details now, so he kind of goes through old papers from the 50s, and he finds an article about a bishop's biker who had been decapitated and how the head was never found. A biker named Harold Swordman Baker.
Don't you hate nicknames like that?
I mean, If you want to be known for your sword, call yourself Swordman.
I guess, yeah. It's like Marvelous Marvelin Hagler. Remember the boxer of the 80s? He died recently, but his nickname was Marvelous, and it really irritated him that people weren't calling him Marvelous, so he legally changed his name to Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Good for him. Just like really force people to get there.
Yeah, there you go. He's like, you don't want to call me that, huh? Guess what?
I mean, it's kind of like how you tell everyone to call you Wet Spaghetti Jordan.
That's right. I actually, on Monday, I'm going to go get my name changed.
Yeah. You'll be like, whip it to me, and then pull a wet spaghetti out of your pocket and slap them.
That all works out together.
Exactly. Anyway, he finds this article. He's like, all right, now I know the guy who's the headless biker in this scenario. And as he's looking at it, Miss Emily's like, hey, you seem to be really into beheadings this week. You should really go check out that guillotine exhibit downtown.
That was the weirdest segue in this episode. That, like, I like that. That's the whole exhibit. Is just like, we have a guillotine from seemingly from the French Revolution, and it was just like, sure, that's happening. Okay, sure, that
is
works
so
out
funny because that's like a Kolchak staples, like to go talk to an expert on
Yeah.
the subject matter. And for some reason, the subject matter this time is beheadings. It's like, go talk to the beheadings expert at the guillotine exhibit.
Yeah, he's gonna be like, that's a clean cut.
I'm not 100% sure who this guest star is. I feel like this was somebody who probably was like on TV at the time because he's clearly like there as a bit of a cameo.
Yeah, I didn't know who he was either.
And he actually does a really great job. I actually was one of my favorite scenes because he like Kolchak shows up and he's like setting up for this exhibit and he's like, you want to write a story about an exhibit? That'd be good for press. And then Kolchak just wants to cover the spooky angle. And this guy's just like, there's nothing spooky about the French Revolution, my man.
Yeah. Do you think it just gets frustrating for everyone involved when Kolchak's sometimes just looking for stuff that's spooky? He's like, I lost my keys. He's like, it must be a ghost. Let's look into it. You're like, Kolchak, no, you just lost your keys.
Like picks up the phone. He's like, you're a locksmith. What's spooky about keys? And it's like, I don't know the answer to this question.
Exactly. They should do an episode like that where he just keeps jumping to conclusions.
But he does get this guy to recall a legend from the French Revolution in which occasionally when a body was beheaded, they would perhaps bury the body away from the head, and then the rumors were the corpses would reappear and like get revenge until the heads were reunited with the bodies. And this basically somehow gives Kolchak all the information. Like, Kolchak, you could have figured this one out on your own.
What's also interesting is that something that's a little different than other episodes of Kolchak and the next one we're going to watch or talk about is that it's just in general with bodies apparently in history and in the world. If you take someone's head off and don't bury it with the body, that person will come back and look for their head. It's not like that person also was possessed or that person had black magic put on them or there was a demon or something. It's just like, no, that's just what happens with bodies.
Perfectly normal thing. If you take a head away, the body's got to get it back.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then cut to that cab driver's wife's sister is getting decapitated in the street. Okay.
So many people get decapitated in this episode. There's like 5 people maybe.
It's so great. Just cut away. It's like, and Kolchak's like, and then that cab driver's wife's sister got off work. I'm like, whoa, a lot of pieces to get through.
Well, they're like, she used to be in a gang years ago, but now she works at a bakery or something. And then the woman who's playing the role looks like she's maybe 20. I'm like, when was she part of the biker gang? When she was 10?
Yeah, it's so quick too. It's like over in a second. And then we cut to the cabbie's wife's house. She's hastily packing her bag. She's getting out of town.
Yeah.
Which, fair. Kolchak shows up to talk to her. She basically comes clean about everything. She's just like, yeah, like it was me, my sister, my soon-to-be husband, this studs guy. And also, there was this 5th guy we haven't talked about up till now. He was also with us. And we set up a hilarious prank for our rival biker, Swordman Baker. We tied a wire across the road to knock him off his bike, but we set it a little too high and it lobbed off his head.
There's a couple of things I thought after this. One, not hilarious at all. If it worked out the way they intended, which is just to knock someone off a motorbike, you have really hurt the person. At worst, even if it was at chest level, you still could have killed the guy if he was going fast enough on the bike.
He would have just lost an arm or two.
Yeah, it was awful. What an awful prank. I love that that's how they, like, the best thing the writers came up with. How did he lose his head? Oh, it was just due to horseplay.
And anyway, this new 5th character she mentions that we've never heard about before, this 5th biker who is part of their gang, apparently he kept the man's head when they found it in a canister as a trophy for a few weeks.
And why did he do that?
Biker cred, baby.
Yeah.
But of course, back in the 50s when he was doing this, a headless biker appeared lobbed off this dude's head, at which point Studs, the guy, the leader of the biker gang, faster than Kolchak ever didn't have to talk to any beheading experts. He put one and one together, dug up that man's grave, returned the head in the canister to that grave, beheading stopped.
Isn't it funny, though, that they have to add all this backstory, how there was another headless biker, like, previously who was also doing this, but, like, it doesn't really have anything to do with the episode other than reveal who this guy is, who, again, it doesn't really matter. I just thought it was such an odd thing to be like, hey, by the way, this happened before. You're like, why? What does it matter? It's like, well, it doesn't really.
They had to explain it that way because if the idea is if you cut the head off a person and separate the body, they hunt you down and kill you. But it's been 20 years since then. So the writers are like, oh, how are we going to explain why the biker is just killing them now? And they're like, oh, well, let's have it that they returned his head 20 years ago and now the head's fallen out again. So now they're back in trouble.
Right.
It's you're not wrong. It's a really long path, but
yeah, it's just it seems like, I don't know. It seems like a couple lines of dialogue could have just
make it a contemporary
much
biker gang. Make it happening to a contemporary biker gang. Like this guy lost his head a week ago.
Yeah, because they want to have him riding a 1950s bike, but why?
Yeah, who knows? Anyway, so the wife comes clean with all this stuff, and then like they hear the roar of an engine outside, and that a ring of the doorbell, and it's very funny. She's like, Kolchak, would you get the door?
Yeah. Classic. I mean, I would do that too.
It's a good bit. Kolchak opens, and of course, it's celebrity police captain Larry Linville there, and he's basically deduced all the same information as Kolchak, but he's come to the conclusion that these killings are just retribution by a living biker for this previous death.
Which, to be fair to Larry, is probably
far more
plausible.
Yeah, 100%.
And let me just stop real quick about this. Almost every episode, not everyone, but very close to it, has a captain or a lieutenant or someone that from the police force that Kolchak is going to kind of butt heads with a little bit.
Yeah, it's either that or the captain of a boat.
Right, that's right. I forgot about that episode. That was a werewolf one, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But what's weird though is, especially in this episode, and it's been in previous episodes, the police haven't really done anything. But I think the viewer is supposed to dislike them just because they are obfuscating or they're standing in Kolchak's way. But especially, I noticed it in this episode, Captain Larry Linville, he's not doing anything really bad to Kolchak, but I get the sense that we're supposed to dislike him just because he's a police officer. Yeah,
the reason we're supposed to dislike him is when we see him off the top, he just seems a little bit anti-press. Like, he doesn't want Kolchak to report things before he's told about them. So I think we're just supposed to think I believe they talk about freedom of the press right off the top, like he's anti-freedom of the press.
Yeah, but I will, not to harp on this too much, I will make the argument, though, I think the police not wanting to release information about murders and things generally have pretty good reasons as to, ongoing cases and things. So it just, I don't know, it just rings a little bit hollow for me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a weak premise on this thing. Like, it is more that 70s mistrust of the police is kind of the shorthand for all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I know you've got your Blue Lives Matter sticker, so
I don't.
That's a joke, everyone. Jordan's cool. It's cool.
Yeah, I'm all right.
Anyway, Kolchak heads out of this lady's house, and she's just like, I just got to go I know what's up. The police aren't going to help. I'm going to go find that head back at that coffin warehouse I was at earlier. He goes back. He finds the broken coffin that Baker was buried in, and there's no body inside now. So he's like, well, this has to be the one. Clearly, that body's off doing something. He then finds the canister, opens it up. There's a skull inside, and he's like, did it. I found the skull. And as soon as he finds it, like, the Headless Biker shows up and starts menacing Kolchak, to which Kolchak's point is like, why are you mad at me? I haven't done anything. But what has to be my favorite way Kolchak has ever defeated one of his enemies is the biker rides at him, and he just, like, half-heartedly throws the skull at the biker, and the biker just, like, falls over.
Yeah, like, I wasn't sure how it was going to work. I mean, look, if they had all the money in the world, what would have been cool is the head actually goes right back onto the body. But what it just looks like is, he half-heartedly lobs it, hits it in the chest, it falls into the ground, and is now a fully formed skeleton.
A fully formed skeleton on the rusted remains of an old motorcycle.
That's right. Yeah, a 1950s one that is very has very noticeable tires.
Very particular tire tracks.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it closes with the classic Kolchak monologue at the end where he's talking to his dictaphone saying, "For some reason, Vincenzo won't publish my story about the Headless Motorcycle driver." And then, I think sort of to your point about, like, the police in this episode, he concludes by saying, "Well, at least Captain Larry Linville was busted down to sergeant for some reason." I'm like, I don't know what he did wrong to get busted down to sergeant.
I know. And that's what made me start thinking about it. I was like, oh, I guess he got his comeuppance for doing his job quite well.
Well, that's it. If you think about his storyline, he didn't want to share information with Kolchak, but that's not something to get bust you down. The police like that on this show. And he had basically pieced literally the whole crime together from 20 years ago and who did it, and had concluded a rival biker gang was now seeking retribution. Very plausible. So really, he would still be on that case of trying to find that. Like, nothing ends this case.
But it's just like, don't you hate him? Because he's got that face. And poor, as I said this before, I think with Larry Linville, unfortunately, the guy's got a real hateable face. I'm sure he was a delightful man, but he's just got a face that you just like to hate.
Well, that's why I got busted down to sergeant.
There you go.
All right, Jordan, you ready for the next one?
Yeah, which I think, Luke, and I don't know how you feel, I think this is the best title so far of all Kolchak episodes. I think it's my favorite title.
Well, here's the Envy summary for episode 16, Demon in Lace.
It was Goethe who said we love girls for what they are. Well, even the great Goethe could have learned something from the tale that took place on the campus of Illinois State Tech.
A succubus takes over the bodies of recently deceased young women so it can seduce and kill young college students.
I can't believe it's taken 16 episodes to get to a succubus, huh?
I will say this. I was surprised how tastefully done the succubus was.
Weren't you blown away? When I saw the premise for this episode before I watched it, I thought, oh man, it's Porky's time, you know? It's going to be college. It's going to be grab ass. There's going to be towels snapping. I expected this
to get real seedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy. But the episode all takes place at Illinois State Tech and begins with a real dude bro driving his car around at night. And as he's driving it, an attractive lady steps into the road and he pulls over and she's like, gives him a little sexy eyes. And he's like, "Get in my car. Let's go make out beside the pond."
Yeah. And here's something I realized. I've never picked someone up and gone and made out in the grass with them. You ever done that, Luke?
I have not, but he's a football star, so who knows what happens in his life.
Hold on. He doesn't do a science fiction podcast?
Well, that doesn't happen to you with that science fiction podcast, eh? You're not driving home through the woods at night.
Like, wait a minute. Did you do an episode on Super Trade? Come here, you. Good that your tongue hasn't been cut off.
Not yet. At any rate, they're making out, and it's a fine scene. Like, it works pretty well. They're making out, and then you see, like, the hand in the back of his neck is now suddenly, like, the hand of a desiccated corpse, and he pulls back, and now she's just, like, this, like, rotted-out corpse, like, really fun-looking makeup, and he just starts screaming.
By the way, I love that that's a trope through movie and TV, which is generally a guy kissing a girl, and almost always it's the woman becomes something hideous or scary or gross, and I think there's this weird emasculating thing or something about, wouldn't it be crazy if you're kissing someone really pretty and then they were ugly?
Well, I mean, you can't gender swap it because all men are gross.
True.
At any rate, Kolchak, of course, arrives the next day at the crime scene. I think he was, like, reporting something nearby, so he drives up to check it out. Mm-hmm. And the lead investigator on the scene is a returning captain from a previous episode.
Yeah, it's I can't remember the captain's name. I'm sure you have it written down, but he's the guy with the mustache, and he's the one in a previous episode, which I don't even remember which one.
Sergeant Mad Dog Sisko.
Oh, right, Mad Dog. And he's the one who was using, I think it was some sort of therapy or something to try to work on his temper, but that is out the roof, because now we get to see what he's like all the time, and the answer is grumpy.
I did like it. Kolchak's like, "I guess you quit therapy." He's like, "Yes." At any rate, he's investigating. They found two bodies on campus that morning. The football player gentleman who died of fright. He's got a very scared look on his face, they say.
Well, yeah, he's seemingly had a heart attack, but his face is stuck in a shocked position. And shocked position, whatever.
You know what we mean.
He looks scared.
And a woman's with him, obviously, but she looks like she did when she was young. She doesn't look like the desiccated corpse. She looks young, and they note, like, she seems to have died of an overdose. She has track marks all over her arm. And so it's sort of a bit of a mystery. And there's this weird thing that happens here is there's a student reporter there, a very Kolchak-esque student reporter, a young woman named, what's her name? Rosalind Winters.
Yeah, Rosalind, yeah.
And, like, Kolchak's obviously badgering Mad Dog for information, and then Rosalind sticks her nose in, and she's trying to get in there and badger for some information, too, because she's, like, the student reporter. And obviously, the cop is rude to her, because that's what you'd expect, is the cops are rude to Kolchak. But then Kolchak turns around and is also incredibly rude to her.
I thought it was going to pay off in some way, but it's just that Kolchak doesn't respect her as a reporter, or he's too busy on his case to be empathetic at all. I'm not really sure what it was, because I thought it was going to be a bit of a team up, I don't know why I keep thinking it's going to happen on this show, because this show, they have zero interest in having anyone work with Kolchak. It's never going to happen.
It's such a setup for a team up. Like, it's just like when they had that young assistant at the station or at the news report. Marblestein. It's the exact same person. You're like, oh, well, obviously he's going to team up with this young reporter and they're going to go on a little adventure together, because she's even like, for some reason, it's so weird. Kolchak mentions in his monologue, he's like, and as I pulled up to the crime scene, I ran out of gas. So he like is asking everyone for a ride to a gas station. So she's like, I'll take you, Kolchak, get on my scooter. And she drives Kolchak to a gas place, and she's telling Kolchak, she's like, hey, like, I'm a student reporter. I'm pretty good. You like something you don't know is this is the second case where a young man and young woman have been discovered dead in very similar circumstances. And Kolchak's like, oh, that's really interesting. And then he just is rude to her again. She's like, why are you being so mean to me? And she leaves him there. But I'm just like, why aren't they teaming them up? Why is Kolchak just mean to her?
It doesn't make any sense. It's just, they just don't want him teaming up for some reason. It's an odd thing, which sometimes, it doesn't always, but sometimes it hurts the show when it makes sense. It makes sense for him to be with someone who could present information from a different angle, but they just don't want to do it.
Or split up and do the thing. Like, there's someone else to be in peril. Like, it all makes sense from a writing perspective, but they're not interested. Anyway, this scene goes on to the first of two bizarre guest star scenes where Kolchak goes to talk to a football coach at the university who provides him next to no information, but played by Jackie Vernon, stand-up comedian from the 50s and 60s. Jackie Vernon is this football coach.
Yeah, and the really only part of the scene that's worthwhile is when he says tuna, which is what I said at the beginning of this episode. He's sort of, I think what they're implying here is Kolchak starts asking him questions about how healthy were these guys, because they were football players and they seemingly they're young, they're in good
they shouldn't have
physical
died
condition.
of a heart attack.
And he's basically like, yeah, we do check, all these athletes and they are fine, but he's like, I think he died from bacteria, is what he says. And I think this is shorthand. I think what he's trying to imply is maybe STIs, but he says bacteria, and then
because he says,
brings out a can of tuna and says tuna as the solution.
Yeah, because he said, like, that's what he says. He's like, the only thing that was weird about them is they were playboys, so they probably got bacteria. And I'm just like, so this is venereal diseases you're trying to play? It's such a short scene. All it does is establish they were healthy, and you never see this man again.
But you're right, that is the point of the scene. The point of the scene is, in case you as a viewer think, oh no, the reason this person died was of a natural heart attack, which you would never think because you've seen the little ghoul kill the person, they have to add this scene in so the guy can make jokes about how tuna keep you healthy or something?
Yeah, they needed Jackie Vernon in there somewhere for some reason.
It's very odd.
Anyway, they cut to that night, and a boyfriend and girlfriend are returning home from a date. They're quite drunk. They've had something to drink, and as they're climbing the stairs of the apartment, the girlfriend slips and like falls down the staircase and snaps her neck and dies at the bottom of the staircase. I
have to say, the stunt performer who did this, it is really well done. It looks quite painful falling down the stairs.
It's a nice little bit. And like the boyfriend checks and he's like, oh no, I think she's dead. And he runs and grabs the phone to call an ambulance. And when he turns around, the body's vanished. And as he'll tell Kolchak later, there's the scent of like weird rotting flesh and death in the air. He knows this because he was in Vietnam.
That's but that is the first time we get this extra bit of information that when this weird sort of thing is happening with the dead bodies and the somehow rising from the grave zombification, there's this putrid odor.
Yes. And this dead woman, she immediately appears at a frat house where a student who assists an archaeology professor, who we'll get to know a little later, at the university lives. And she like just knocks on his door and she's like, I've seen you around and I'm really into you. And he's just like, oh, so why don't you come on in and we can like maybe do some kissing.
also has never happened to me. I've never just answered my door and a lady said, "Can I come on in?" Because what I would say is, no, thank you.
It's a long life ahead of you, Jordan. It could happen. It could still happen.
One time, a really odd guy came to the door and asked to use my phone, and I did let him use my phone, and then he wouldn't give the phone back, and it became a whole big thing. But anyways, that's not why he called.
That's a real story you've got there.
I knew he was peculiar at first, but I kind of felt bad for him, and I was like, I don't know, should I give him my phone? And the answer was no.
But you answered yes.
I yes-anded it.
Anyway, this assistant, he works for a Professor Spat, I believe, which is very funny because I think we had Spud Spack last episode. Now we have Professor Spat this episode. I don't know what's going on with his naming convention.
Which professor is he? Is he the one that wears the one-piece outfit with the cravat?
Yes, he's the one straight out of 1974.
Yeah, he's really hitting the 70s.
Yeah. Half-open shirt, cravat, necklace in his chest hair. It's all there.
Yeah.
The two of them have been translating a 10,000-year-old Sumerian tablet recently discovered by a researcher who went to Iran and went insane after finding it.
Yeah, Professor Whitehead is the guy's name.
Yes. So his assistant has now been killed by another recently deceased woman in his apartment, and of course, the next day the police, Mad Dog's there. He's interviewing the other frat boys. He's looking into it. Kolchak pratfalls through a door and is caught snooping.
There's one interesting thing about this scene, and it happened earlier, and I didn't really notice, but I went back and checked. I guess it's just in terms of to keep things at a clip in this episode, but they interview people quite literally standing over the dead bodies.
100%.
And I can't imagine that is proper police procedure, because it's very odd to see. Literally, it's like, can you imagine your friend has been murdered and then they're asking you questions about it, but the dead body is at your feet? At one point, they're literally in between the guy's legs. I was like, take him out of the room. Go interview him in the...
Jordan, I just wave you in, and I point what's this all about? What's going on here?
But to the people's credit, no one seems to be that upset. Again, if it was a friend of mine and they had one died, I'd be so heartbroken, let alone having to see the body. But they're just like, yeah, I don't know, he was a football player. Oh, look, he's there dead on the floor.
They've all been to Vietnam.
He's like, this is nothing like that family I blowtorched.
But basically, Kolchak gets caught, gets tossed out, but he kind of gets enough information to go track down the boyfriend who watched his girlfriend die on the stairs the day before. And this is where the guy's just like, it's really weird. She disappeared. I definitely know she was dead because of my time in Vietnam. I love that this is the shorthand for it. And Kolchak's just like, this is getting very interesting. So he's like, I better go talk to this episode's other bizarre guest star in another very bizarre scene. He goes to visit I guess she's in charge of the school's records. She's a bureaucrat in charge of the school's records. Yeah. And it is Caroline Jones, better known as Morticia Adams, working there.
Oh, that's who it was. I couldn't recognize her.
Yeah, Morticia Adams there. And he just wants to get student records out. And they just have a weird, I think, played for comedy scene where she just tells him all the forms he needs to fill out. And they just do a weird, jokes about bureaucracy. And he never gets those records as far as I can tell, and she never comes back.
There's a certain playfulness of this episode that isn't always in the show, and I think I kind of liked it. I don't know if I would like it all the time, but there was something just sort of fun about it. I was like, sure, why not? But you're right. In terms of the structure of the episode, it serves no function. So he went to go talk to the gym teacher who gives him no information. He goes to this lady who gives him no information. He does eventually go back to the archaeologist type professor, but the first couple times he goes, he gets nothing.
Yeah, it's very odd. And I was shocked. I'm like, what a great idea for a guest star on Kolchak is to have Morticia at perfect sense. It's just that's a perfect piece of guest casting. She's in 40 seconds of it complaining about paperwork.
Yeah.
Anyway. Kolchak goes back to INS, the newspaper, and he starts piecing together that all the dead women, all these scenes had actually all deceased earlier, records of them dying in other places earlier in the day and then being at these scenes. So it doesn't really line up. How can they be dead early in the day and then also be dead at the crime scenes? And one of my favorite parts of this episode is Vincenzo. He's decided he wants INS now to be a fun, happy newspaper, so he hates this story. He's just no, we're only good news at this paper now.
Yeah, he basically is news is depressing. People are getting tired of depressing news. Why don't we just do uplifting stories? Sort of you see on local news, local puppy found, and that's all he wants to do. And then the kind of push and pull of this is he's telling Kolchak and getting more and more excited about it, and Kolchak's like, yeah. Anyways, I got this story about all these dead teenagers.
Yeah. Well, and my favorite part of it is like Kolchak. I mean, Vincenzo hates the story, and he's just like, Kolchak's just like, but listen, it's crazy. The women were dead hours before they were found at the crime scenes with the men who died with them. And Vincenzo just says, listen, that's not a story, man. It just goes to prove the youth of today are depraved. And I was like, is Kolchak saying he assumes necrophilia is happening on all campuses in America?
There's another thing in the scene though, which also has nothing to do with the episode, which is they're working on crosswords. And by the way, did you love how Miss Emily has to make a crossword? She's got like a big board where she's moving letters around, and I was like, is that how they do crosswords? Anyways,
I love that.
But long way to say they're going through all this stuff, and eventually gets to the point where Vincenzo mentions that he used to play drums, and he is in a band in the 1940s called Tony Vincenzo's Neapolitans.
I know. I was also interested in, I was like, I'd like to know about Vincenzo's band.
Yeah, but it's good. This episode has whoever the writer was. There's just a real kind of upbeat feeling to this episode, and I think it maybe hit me at the right time when I watched it, where I was just like, sure, more silliness that doesn't add to anything. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, they're cute scenes. You're right. They don't add to anything, but like they're fun to cut to for sure. I mean, Kolchak kind of leaves the office and he goes to talk to that Professor Spat. I think he's done it a few times in the episode, but he's there. He's talking about the various dead assistants he now has, and he like it's a fun Kolchak scene where Kolchak shows up. He's posing as an archaeology journalist to get in the door, basically. Yeah. And they're talking about the Sumerian tablet he's translating, and the professor's sort of explaining the various words that have been translated. And one of them is the word mint. And he's like, it could be, something. It might be a recipe of some sort. And Kolchak's, oh yes, a recipe. Probably something for lamb, I would assume, because it has some mint jelly on it. And the guy's just like, what? What are you talking about? And Kolchak, of course, just embarrasses himself, and he gets like, he's like, oh, so you don't know anything about archaeology?
Yeah. Also, to be fair, this seemed dumb even for Kolchak. In terms of like, not that Kolchak's dumb, but like, he's always kind of thinking on his feet, and it isn't always the best. He doesn't always go about in the best way. But this seemed like, I'm like, Kolchak, come on, you're smarter than this.
It's true. I mean, all it's there for is so he can see the tablet and learn the term Sumerian, so he can figure out his next piece of clues.
Right.
Which of course then we cut to we just cut away. Some woman is having a nap on her couch. She's left the gas on her stove. She's dead. So guess who's getting possessed by the succubus next?
Yeah. What a sad thing though. They just mentioned that she was tired, so she went down for a nap, and she was making coffee on the stove while she was doing that, and that's what killed her. I'm like, oh, this poor lady.
It was a very tragic way to die. But she obviously her body disappears immediately, and next we see her possessed body is now at the campus. She's hooking up, or she's trying to hook up. She's basically met this student who's on his way to a job interview with the professor to be his new assistant, and this student goes to this job interview with a woman he just met, and he's kind of on a date with. He just shows up, and he's just like, hey, I'm here to talk to you about your assistant position. Also, I brought this girl I met with me.
Two things I'll mention about that. One, the professor is into it. He's like, why haven't you introduced me to this beautiful creature? I'm a 1970s gross prick. And that's the one thing I want to mention.
You just don't like that mustache.
The second thing I'll mention is this actually happened to me once at work, where someone brought their wife, and I won't go into it, but I said the wife had to leave because we were at work.
You didn't say, who is this beautiful creature?
No, I said, why did you bring your wife? And they were like, because reasons. And I said, she has to stay outside. Sorry, this is a workplace.
He wanted her to come into just hang out for the day.
Yeah, and I just said no because I'm Vincenzo, and I don't have a sense of humor about that.
What I do like though is the professor's sort of hi, I'm the professor. He's introducing himself, and the possessed succubus woman just starts laughing maniacally, just so hard at him.
So, okay, now let me ask you this. I was confused because what it seems like is, at least what I thought is, this whole thing was, there's clearly some sort of possession or demon or something happening, and it is trying to get closer and closer to this professor who has this tablet. That's what I thought. So now that she was in the room with the tablet, she was sort of revealing who she was, and she's acting sort of like this maniacal laughter, as you said. But what just happens is she laughs, and then they just leave.
Yeah.
Because the guy feels awkward that she's leaving, and I was like, so what? Why was she laughing that way?
I assume she saw his open shirt and the cravat and like the open chest hair and was just like, look at this Joker.
But it's funny because it's that thing where you do it right before a commercial and you go, oh no, what's gonna happen? And the answer is nothing.
Nothing. She just left.
Yeah, she just left. She just laughed and then left.
It was a weird interaction for everybody, but that's fine.
And then later on, I think it's probably 10 minutes from now in the episode where she comes back and she's like, hey, sorry I laughed. And he's like, yeah, I guess I overreacted.
Yeah. The student she's into is just like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. You're pretty.
Yeah.
Anyway, Kolchak now, he knows about the word Sumerian, so he somehow tracks down a discredited professor who is dressed like a priest as well.
Yeah, this guy is sort of like whatever organization he's a member of. He's sort of like the molder of them. He's in the basement. He's kind of
he's real down on his luck.
Yeah, he's down on his luck. He seems to be trying to like sell Kolchak like a subscription to like a newsletter or something to try to make ends meet. What is it?
Magazine subscription sales to him.
Right. So, but yes, why is he dressed like a priest? I'm not sure. Maybe he is a priest. I don't know, but he's just there to give information. But then just to add to the weirdness, for whatever reason, he keeps falling asleep.
Yeah, he also has narcolepsy.
Yeah, it's just like, and the only reason they do that is because they needed a quick reason for Kolchak to get the book from him, which I don't know why they need to. So he's able to do it because the guy falls asleep at one point.
Yeah, it's really weird. And it's also, Kolchak can take the word Sumerian and like the idea of that and then find it. This guy gives him, he steals an old book from this guy, which talks about how this tablet has been found before, I think back in the Crusades or something, and some people died. And it appears to be bringing a succubus back to life. And the people who found it had originally attempted, in the book they say that like we should destroy it. That's the only way to stop the succubus. But the people were like, oh, well, instead let's bury it, even though we know we should destroy it, because we'll leave it for someone else to destroy later or something. Mm-hmm. It's all very, very weird.
Oh, I'll mention one thing. Later on, we see that potential professor's assistant. He's reading a book, some sort of archaeological book on the time period, but the props is so badly made, and it's just a book that just says the word Persia on it, and it's like on an angle, and it just looked so bad. And I was like, guys, at least give it like some sort of title for a book, like the Persian Empire or Persia 1500 or something. It was just like Persia. I was like, all right, sure, okay.
Well, this is the big climax. Is this guy's reading his Persia book, and the succubus comes in. And she's like, "Hey, you wanna make out?" And he's like, "Yeah, of course I do." And we cut to Kolchak. He's racing to the professor's office. Actually, I'm gonna stop us there because there's actually a scene in between this. These two are gonna make out, and Kolchak has an idea that this professor's assistant is in danger. For some reason, he knows that like. He sort of saw the succubus around campus and saw him sort of near this guy, and he's just like, I'm suspicious that man's in danger. So he calls up that reporter the student reporter who we haven't seen all episode. Apparently,
she's been gone for like 40 minutes.
Apparently, off screen, he's called her up because he's at the student office with her, the student press office, and he just has her calling women on campus to ask if they know of a hunky blonde man.
And at one point, she's like, he's got to be better than an 8 out of 10.
Yeah. And finally, someone she talks to on the phone is just like, this is his name. And she's like, Kolchak, we found the hunky blonde man you saw. She's like, let's go find him. She gets up from her desk she's making calls at, and Kolchak says, shut the fuck up and sit down. You're not coming with me. Yeah. And I'm like, what? What is happening here?
It's very bizarre.
Like, I was just like, I don't understand. Like, why did you bring this character back? And then why is, like, Kolchak just so mean to her at all times?
It did feel like maybe in an earlier draft, she was a much more prominent character. And then after some editing, she just got left in. Like, she's just, I don't know. There's just traces of a character. It's very odd.
But, like, this whole thing is, like, Kolchak's figured out it's a succubus. He figured out it has to do with the tablet. He somehow tracks down this woman so that she can find the name of the handsome guy Kolchak thinks is in trouble. Kolchak races out of the office and just runs to the professor's office and starts smashing. Like, he could have, like, he just got, like, it's not like he goes to find the kid. He just races to smash the tablet he already knew to smash. Like, there's, like, I don't understand what, like, it was just, like, I don't understand what was happening at the end here.
I don't know. They just had to extend it. I have to say, this episode had a few things. I don't know if you noticed. There was a few scenes that I think there was length issues with this episode, because at the very beginning of the episode, there's a scene where Kolchak's driving, and it goes on for about I would say probably 30 to 45 seconds when it should have been maybe 15 seconds. I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it felt long. And there's a couple like that, like, that sort of shoe leather of just traveling scenes and stuff. And I was like, oh, I think there was some editing issues.
It was like, extend his monologue a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the point. Kolchak races to the professor's office. He starts trying to smash the tablet, and the professor's like, don't smash my tablet. And then we cut back to where the hunky student's making out with the succubus, and she, of course, is starts screaming because someone's smashing her tablet and becomes the desiccated corpse we've seen before. And I was just like, okay, well, this guy's dead now. He just saw the succubus, but I guess he's not. He's just like, oh, well, we didn't make out long enough for me to be dead, I guess, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, everything that happened to the last guy happened to you, but whatever. The succubus obviously races out of this room, runs back to the professor's study to stop Kolchak from smashing the tablet. But Kolchak smashes it,
and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and
it kills her.
She drops dead, and it does something we've seen before, where she turns into a skeleton and then a pile of dust. They've done this before.
Yeah, who was it that this happened to before?
It was with that. It was Jaws from James Bond on the top of the skyscraper.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then Kolchak is gonna get in trouble for smashing the ancient tablet, but because the professor saw the crazy succubus, he just says it was an accident. So Kolchak gets off the hook, and it's that's the end of the story.
And then, does a police captain get knocked down to a lower rank? No, not in this episode.
I mean, I assume off screen. The professor should have got knocked down to a TA or something. They're like, and that professor, he got knocked down to a lower rank of teacher's assistant.
Yeah, exactly. But that's 2 episodes. 2, I would almost say, it's not the right word, but almost zany episodes.
Yeah, I agree. They're both definitely wacky, or I think the first one wackier than usual, because Chopper, Headless Biker, it wasn't written by, that's not the credit, but the story by credit went to Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale on that one. So an early Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, probably they wrote a story for Kolchak and they picked it up and someone else kind of did the writing for it.
Yeah.
And let's rate it. Let's talk about the ratings. Okay. I'll start with Chopper, and it's really cheesy. The effects are certainly bargain basement.
Yeah.
But Headless Biker, and they do it in kind of a very fun way, it doesn't work very well from a structural plotting perspective, but there's lots of fun little scenes, and I really I just love watching this Headless Biker with a little bone sticking out his neck jumping over a police car. It has a lot of fun to it. It's not a great episode, but it's a fun episode. I'm gonna give 6.5.
I'll tell you, I would take a guy with gigantic shoulders so you can't see his head over a CGI version of this any day. I don't care that it looks hokey. It looks way better than most silver robot Marvel villains that are at the end of movies. They look terrible. So I feel the same. This was kind of weirdly hokey, and I have a feeling, and maybe I'd be wrong, I have a feeling the show is going to start getting lighter as we go, just in tone, because that's what it feels like. I know, and you're right, it wouldn't hurt it. I whatever reason, I watched this really late last night. I was tickled. 7 out of 10.
That's great. I mean, honestly, it's cheesy, it's campy, but I actually think it's something that Kolchak can do well.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is, Kolchak can remain Kolchak. He can remain focused and grumpy and dealing with all these dark elements, but they can be zany.
He's already bumbly.
Yeah.
So it doesn't hurt the tone of the show. He's focused and doing it, but he's also a bit of a bumbling hero, and he's not always right on top of it. I don't like his recent developments of his attitude toward women. I'm not loving that development, but in general, he's a fun character to bumble along with, so that it doesn't hurt the tone.
Yeah,
it's kind of like Mulder. He's a bit of a goof, so you can get away with some goofy stuff. Whereas if he was a smoldering, sexy, hard case, it's not gonna work.
Agreed. And so the next episode, one of the oddest episodes we've seen. What do you think of that one?
Demon in Lace. Listen, when I saw what it was going to be, I thought it was going to be a lot more scandalous and get kind of
keep it on ladies in the showers.
In general, when a movie or TV show uses the concept of a succubus, I mean, I think we saw it on Sleepwalkers. There was a succubus in the mines killing the men, and it was so bad. It was such a bad episode, and really gross gender politics to it.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
And this shockingly, both the men and the women involved were victims to a ancient being who is doing stuff, and so it didn't feel quite as like cynical as some of the other things we've seen. I think it's a huge mess. Like the 2 random guest stars who showed up for no reason. Like I felt like I lean a little bit toward liking it, but like it was just such a mess. I'm gonna go 5.5.
I know what you're gonna say. This episode for me is there was an episode of Tech War way back when what's to say? Greg Evigan was I don't know, some woman died and she was in a robo coffin and he was holding her hand or something, and you would get really irritated how high I rated it. And this is going to be the episode for me. For I know I agree with you on everything. This, for all intents and purposes, is a mess of an episode. And again, I think there was some severe editing problems in this. I think it explains why Rosalind's in the very beginning of the episode and the very end of the episode. Maybe it was scheduling. Who knows? But for whatever reason, this episode, I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought it was silly and dumb. 7.5 out of 10.
Wow, it hit you at the right time.
Yeah, it really did.
I mean, it's fun when we both experience different episodes.
I think in the last 4 or so episodes, I think our ratings have gone pretty far apart.
I mean, definitely last week we felt very differently about it. I mean, we're not quite as far apart this week, but still, I think a bit far apart is how we feel about them.
Yeah, but what do you think is going to happen the next few episodes? Do you think it's going to find its footing, this show, or do you think it's going to get zanier? Do you think it's going to get more low budget? What do you think?
I mean, here's the thing. There's only 4 left, and I have to feel like the writing's on the wall for everybody at this point. So, I truly think, I think at this late in the series, I think they know something's the axe is coming for them. It could get really lazy. It could get really wild. I think it could go anyway right at this point.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of excited to see because I think you're right. I think probably everyone involved was like, hey, we got 4 weeks left of this show, so well, let's see what happens.
Let's see where this is going, I guess.
Yeah.
At any rate, if you have anything you want to email us about, you can get us at continuumdrag@gmail.com. And, I love to get your emails. Jordan, one of these days, I'm going to do a mailbag segment, I feel like.
Yeah, we should.
People have been writing and saying nice things. I never say anything ever. I just read it and delete it.
I was going to say, years ago, it actually was years ago. I think it was in the first season. We did one where people, I read out things that people didn't like that we said, like corrections.
Did we do that?
Yeah. That was like season 1, I think.
Oh, that, to be fair, the corrections you read out were all from guest Jane.
I think probably some of them were. You're probably right.
I mean, she was right about all of them. At any rate, moving beyond email, I assume I said the address. If I didn't, oh well. You can also get clips of this show on Instagram and Twitter. The handles there is @ContinuumDrag. Definitely going to be some headless bike tricks coming your way.
Maybe some freeze frames of people getting their heads cut off.
A desiccated corpse giving you a kiss.
Mm-hmm.
It's all going to be there.
Maybe a guest star's just saying tuna. What a clip.
But that's it, everybody. Thank you for joining us this week. And Jordan, I'll see you next week.
I will see you then. Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario. Theme music by James Rex Seidler. Produced by Jordan Dullock and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Hughes.